Garden Basics with Farmer Fred is brought to you by Smart Pots, the original lightweight, long-lasting fabric plant container. It's made in the USA. Visit smartpots.com/Fred for more information and a special discount. That's smartpots.com/Fred. Welcome to the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast. If you're just a beginning gardener or you want good gardening information, well, you've come to the right spot. Are you growing lavender? Our favorite retired college horticulture professor, Debbie Flower, has tips on how to rejuvenate aging lavender plants. UC Davis Arboretum Superintendent Emeritus Warren Roberts tells us all about that prolific summer bloomer, the Crape Myrtle tree. How can you tell when it's best for harvesting backyard fruits and vegetables? And when you bring them inside, where's the best place to store them to last the longest? Do you put them on the counter, in the refrigerator, or maybe some combination of both? We supply the answers to those questions for some of our most popular backyard crops. It's all on episode 125 of the Garden Basics with Farmer Fred podcast, brought to you today by Smart Pots and Dave Wilson Nursery, and we'll do it all in under 30 minutes. Let's go.
Hi, Fred. It's Terry up here in Nevada City, Zone 7. Can we talk lavender? I've got some 7 or 8 year old lavender plants. They're the Dew Provence variety, and I'm getting a lot of dieback. Part of the plant is dying back. So I was wondering if it has anything to do with the rock mulch that I put under there. And also they get full of leaves, the oak leaves. So in the springtime, I'm clearing out all the oak leaves that are packed into the plant. Can you talk about lavender for me, please? Thank you. Bye.
Terry, thanks so much for your question. Thanks for using speakpipe.com/garden basics for getting us that question. It's easy to use. Everybody ought to try it. You can, no data charges. It's free. Go ahead and give it a try. Speakpipe.com/garden basics. Debbie Flower is here to help us answer garden questions here on the Garden Basics podcast. Terry is in Nevada City in the Sierra foothills, which is about 2,500, 3,000 feet. I'm reckoning.
I'm guessing. I don't know.
Yeah. And she said USDA Zone 7, right. And that gets cold. That's down to 0 or 5 degrees.
Yes, I taught up there for a while, and I would drive from the Sacramento area. It took me at least an hour up to the Nevada City campus of Sierra College, and sometimes there would be snow there.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So something to consider. How does lavender do in the snow?
Well, Terry's grown it for 8 years, so
it does okay.
It has the ability to take cold, yes. She talked about using rock mulch, and that's fine. Rock mulch is covers the soil. It's a fine thing to use. The thing that piqued my interest is she talked about the oak leaves falling in the plant. And so that would be happening in the fall. And when we get rain, Nevada City included, it is in that fall and winter and into the early spring. And if those leaves remain on the plant or around the stem of the plant, they can hold moisture there. And that will cause death of lavender.
Oh, okay. So it has a very sensitive crown area then.
Yes, it needs excellent drainage and does not want organic matter collecting up around the trunk of the plant. It can lead to diseases getting into the plant and killing them.
So Terry mentioned that she's using a rock mulch. What are the downsides of using a rock mulch around lavender?
For me, the rock mulch is a problem because it limits where I can plant things.
Yeah.
Eventually, it collects organic matter. Over time. She talked about oak leaves falling in her garden. I can relate to that as well. And so those sections will get filled up, but they'll just break down like organic matter does. Rock mulch can heat up, but it takes a while for that heat to transfer into the soil below. Depending on its color, it can reflect heat up into the plant, and for some plants that's not desirable. And if it's big rock, it can be actually very heavy.
Yeah.
And that can physically impair the root development.
Does it compact the soil?
Well, not just sitting there necessarily, but if it's big rock and it was brought by a truck or even a shovel and dumped there, that activity would compact soil, yes.
Now, Terry did not mention the reason for using the rock, I'm wondering if it's because she wants to use a blower to blow the leaves away.
Yes, people do enjoy that. Yeah. And there are some examples of, it's mostly alpine plants that live in rock, that where you go see them and maybe it appeals to her visually. The plant being 8 years old can have portions that look dead. Lavender is a woody plant, and as it ages, if it is not pruned regularly, annually, then the older stems will become more woody, and the plant will grow up and flop over, so that it could look dead and not be dead. In the winter, when it gets cold, lavender in general can take down to USDA Zone 5, but it can look dead. It might lose some of its leaves and flower parts and such, and so the stems can look dead. So it's good to know how to check if a stem is truly dead, and that is to take your thumbnail or something equivalent and scrape along the bark. Don't do it in a lot of places, but do it where you think it might be dead. And I usually start at the tip of a branch I think might be dead, because sometimes that can allow disease in, and then that portion you scraped can become a problem. So I start at the tip in case I need to cut that off. And you want to scrape. It should come off, the bark should come off easily, and it should be shiny and probably green underneath. The shininess would be moisture from life, and the green would be the chlorophyll. If that part is dead, you can work your way back toward the crown, which is the center of the plant, and keep checking. And if the whole branch is dead, it should be removed when death is found. Pruning of dead, diseased, and damaged plant parts should be done when they are seen, not at any particular season.
One of my favorite books, the American Horticultural Society's Pruning and Training book, mentions about lavender. Replace old and neglected specimens. Mm-hmm. Would this be in that category?
It could be. She doesn't talk about whether she's been pruning it or not. I have a single lavender plant in my landscape. It's probably also about 8 years old, and some years I prune it and some years I don't. And when I prune it, it's gorgeous and it's symmetrical, and every year it blooms beautifully, whether I do that pruning or not. But if you do prune, you want to wait until after it's flowered. Then the plant will generally throw new growth. And if you have one of those bare stems laying out because the plant has grown up and fallen over, you might see new growth down close to the crown of the plant on that. And you can prune back as long as you leave several inches of active green growth on the plant. So you want active little stems with green on them, and leave the reference I looked at said 2 inches. To me, that's not quite enough. I would leave probably 4. And then you are pretty much guaranteed of regrowth and a more compact plant.
And I guess if you prune back into the old wood, it's probably not going to resprout.
Right. If you prune back into wood that does not have that growth on it, it will not resprout. You can kill it that way. If you prune it the wrong time, prune it in winter when it's kind of naked, mm-hmm. It won't recover.
So autumn?
Well, after flowering. Flowering is in spring, so yeah, after flowering is the best time.
Yeah, and that gives it plenty of time to set out new growth, too.
Right.
All right. Okay. That should help.
I hope so.
All right. Terry, hope that helps you out with your lavender. Thanks for the question, and thank you, Debbie Flower, for your lavender-like knowledge.
You're welcome, Fred.
We're glad to have Smart Pots on board supporting the Garden Basics podcast. Smart Pots are the original award-winning fabric planter. They're sold worldwide. Smart Pots are proudly made 100% in the USA. I'm pretty picky about who I allow to advertise on this program. My criteria, though, is pretty simple. It has to be a product I like, a product I use, a product I would buy again. And Smart Pots clicks all those boxes. They're durable, they're reusable. Smart Pots are available at independent garden centers and select Ace and True Value stores nationwide. To find a store near you, visit smartpots.com/Fred. It's Smart Pots, the original award-winning fabric planter. Go to smartpots.com/Fred for more info and that special Farmer Fred discount on your next Smart Pot purchase. Go to smartpots.com/Fred. A lot of gardeners are experts at planting and raising vegetables in the backyard garden. However, figuring out the best time to harvest those crops with optimum flavor and nutrition can be a guessing game. In addition, few gardeners know the best way to store those fresh veggies after they've been picked. Here are some tips from the Home Garden Seed Association and the UC Davis Department of Post-Harvest Technology. For tomatoes, in most cases, should be slightly soft when squeezed before picking and fully colored, but there are exceptions. Large heirloom tomatoes can be prone to cracking, and they are actually best picked before they have completely turned color. They'll continue to ripen after harvest. Store tomatoes on the kitchen counter, out of direct light and heat, in a vented plastic bowl or a perforated plastic bag. Tomatoes shouldn't be in the refrigerator. They won't ripen there, and they'll lose their flavor. If you're picking a lot of green beans, pick them when they're long, slender, and crisp before the seeds form lumps in the pods. Pick them often, as beans can become tough and stringy on the vine. Store in the refrigerator in perforated plastic bags in the produce drawers, but you have to use them within a few days. Don't mix any fruits with vegetables in the same refrigerator drawer. The ethylene gas produced by the fruits is detrimental to the quality of nearby vegetables. And as you've probably figured out by now, summer squash is best picked when it's small. Small is better, especially when it comes to zucchini and yellow crookneck squash. They're at their most tender when no bigger than 4 to 6 inches. Patty pan squash is best picked when only 3 inches or smaller, and you want to store those in the refrigerator. What about peppers? Well, let them turn to their mature color on the plant, and that color might be red or yellow or orange. When it has those colors, it has maximum flavor. But check them daily, as peppers deteriorate very quickly after reaching maturity. There's nothing wrong with picking and eating them when green, though. But use your clippers. Don't pull them off the plant. And they're best clipped when they're firm and full-sized. Room temperature storage is best. However, peppers, cucumbers, and eggplant can be kept in the refrigerator for 1 to 3 days, but you have to use them soon after removal from the refrigerator. What about melons? Man, oh man, I bet you've heard the stories about how to tell if there's a ripe melon. Well, forget about thumping the melon to determine ripeness. Watermelons turn a dull color when ripe, and the tendril that's closest to the fruit, it should be shriveling. For cantaloupes, the well-defined netting will turn green to tan. Honeydews develop a yellow blush on their ivory-colored rinds, and you want to store melons at room temperature. For eggplants, look for the nice reflective sheen when they're at their peak of readiness. Size and color are not necessarily indicators of maturity. As eggplants get older, the skins get tough and dull and the flesh gets bitter, so you want to harvest eggplants as soon as they achieve that smooth, glossy finish. Eggplants last the longest, which is only a few days really, when stored at room temperatures of 50 to 55 degrees. Now, who has a room right now in the summertime at 50 to 55 degrees? Well, good for you if you have a root cellar, but for the rest of us, well, don't put them in the refrigerator though. Just find a cool spot on the kitchen counter. And you want to avoid storing eggplant around any fruits that release ethylene gas, and that's apples, bananas, melons, and yes, tomatoes too. Now, what about winter squash? Now, there's a confusing term. Winter squash, as you may know, is planted around May, maybe June, but it's not harvested until wintertime. Winter squash is sweetest when fully mature. It could be mid-fall to winter. When it's ripe, the rind becomes hard and is no longer shiny. The way to test winter squash for readiness, test it with your fingernail. If it can be scratched but not punctured, it's mature. And then cut the squash with the pruners, leaving a short handle, and let it cure in a warm space for 10 days before storing it in a cool, dry place. Are you thinking of growing fruit trees? Well, you probably have a million questions, like which fruit trees will grow where I live? What are the tastiest fruits? How do I care for these trees? The answers are nearby. They're just a click away with the informative Fruit Tube video series at davewilson.com. That's Dave Wilson Nursery, the nation's largest grower of fruit trees for the backyard garden. They've got planting tips, taste test results, links to nurseries in your area that carry Dave Wilson fruit trees. Your harvest to better health begins at davewilson.com. The Sacramento County Master Gardeners have a new video posted at their YouTube channel about choosing and planting many of the cool season vegetables that you might be considering. The downside? You're going to have to look at my face. Sorry. But there is a lot of good cool season veggie info to make up for that. Again, the video can be found at the Sacramento County Master Gardener YouTube page, and we'll have a link to that in today's show notes. Plus, coming up on Saturday, August 7th, the Master Gardeners have a full morning of garden presentations on their Harvest Day Zoom channel. I'll be one of the presenters, live from the Abutilon jungle here at Barking Dog Studios in suburban Purgatory, answering your garden questions. That's Saturday, August 7th, and you need to register for this Zoom garden class. It's free, and you'll find a link in today's show notes, or check out the Harvest Day page at the Sacramento County Master Gardener website, sacmg.ucanr.edu/Harvest Day. Like I said, there is a link in the show notes. Every week here on the Garden Basics podcast, we like to talk with Warren Roberts out at the UC Davis Arboretum. He is their Superintendent Emeritus, knows a lot about plants, and he always has an interesting plant for us to talk about, usually a plant that's currently putting on a show, possibly where you live. Today's plant of the week, it's a tree with a long bloom season in the summertime, the Crape Myrtle. And Warren, it's amazing the improvements that have been made in Crape Myrtles over the years, to the point where there are so many colorful varieties now that are resistant to powdery mildew.
Yes, that was the main reason they weren't grown in the Bay Area when I was growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, because with the fog, and the moist and cool mornings, the powdery mildew would kind of take over. It was pretty in its own regard, but you didn't get a very good flower show with it. But in the Central Valley of California, wow, I can still remember as just a little tiny kid being amazed at the color of the Crape Myrtles in Oildale, California, in the hot Central Valley.
It's amazing how adaptable it is. It can be grown throughout much of the Sun Belt in the United States.
Yes, it can. It was first brought into the United States, I read, in, I think it was Charleston in the 1700s. So we were still part of Great Britain in those years. And it became a popular ornamental, small to medium-sized tree throughout the Southeast. And it still is. It's very popular in those areas. The main species is Lagerstroemia indica. It is the one main species, Lagerstroemia indica, is just the tip of the genus iceberg. There are many species in tropical Asia. One of them is, it's Lagerstroemia speciosum, is a truly tropical one, and you do see that in the Hawaiian Islands and in San Diego and Florida. But the species that most people grow is the Lagerstroemia indica.
What does indica stand for?
Indica, I-N-D-I-C-A. Well, it means from the Indies, which can be very broadly defined. Usually it means the East Indies, which is to say Southeast Asia. It could be India. The name Indies, I think, is derived from India. But a lot of plants from China have that specific epithet as well. At any rate, when you see that, that's an indication of its origin in Southeast Asia.
And so what we commonly refer to as the Lagerstroemia indica is its origins from Asia?
Yes, it is. China is one of the main sources of its diversity of this particular species. And I remember going to the National Museum in Taipei in Taiwan, and there was a beautiful painting of a Crape Myrtle on a fan, a very old painting, and it looked just like what we see today. It was a nice, bright pink colored one. The species colors for flowers can be all the way from pure white over to lavender or light purple, and then to pink, to some that now are dark pure red, and some of those even have kind of purplish leaves. So the limitation of color has expanded a lot. Also, the resistance to disease, and there are a whole series of hybrids that are particularly disease resistant, and they're the results of a cross between the Lagerstroemia indica and Lagerstroemia species subcostata variety Faureae.
It's easy for you to say.
I know. the variety Faurii, I guess that'd be how you pronounce it, Faurii, and it's native to the Ryukyu Islands of Japan, an area which is cooler and moister, I guess, than China. So that is the source of the resistance to the mildew, but it's also more tree-like than the regular one, and so some of the hybrids are used as street trees. One in particular, the Lagerstroemia natchez, Natchez, has white flowers. I think I've got the right name on that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's used as the main street tree in Washington, D.C.
I believe it was the National Arboretum that actually developed those mildew-resistant hybrids and then named them after Native American tribes.
Yes, I think Dr. Egolf was the one who did that at the National Arboretum in Washington, D.C. And some of the hybrids are low-growing and some are taller. Many of them have good fall color as well. So, for example, Lagerstroemia natchez has the beautiful white flowers, a long blooming season, and in the fall, the leaves turn a bright red. If you're shopping for Lagerstroemias, it's always a good idea to shop for them when they're in flower so you get the color you want. And then if you miss the search and gather during the spring, we'll go through the nurseries in the fall and see which ones have good fall color, because really it's some of the best fall color in the garden in that time of year.
It is one of the most forgiving plants I can think of when it comes to pruning. If you asked 10 gardeners, how do you prune a crepe myrtle, you might easily get 10 different answers. Some of them can be quite complicated. But the fact of the matter is, whatever you do to it, it will forgive you and keep growing.
And you really don't need to prune it. It really, unless you want to prune, then go ahead. Because you don't get any, my experience is you get just as many flowers whether you prune or not. The capsules that produce the seed are kind of interesting looking and kind of add another bit of interest to the winter garden.
Oh, and the bark
is beautiful.
Yeah, exactly.
We both thought of that at the same time.
It's the bark.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Beautiful. Yeah. Species from the Ryukyu looks like it's covered with chocolate powder. But the regular Lagerstroemia indica has this beautiful patchiness where the bark peels off in patches and leaving a very smooth trunk. Everything about the plant is beautiful.
It's the crepe myrtle, Lagerstroemia, which to me still sounds like a craft beer name. Lagerstroemia indica, the crepe myrtle, one of the longest blooming plants you can find around for the summertime. In fact, there's an old farmer's saying, much like Warren, you talk about the Prunus mume. When that is in bloom in late winter, then that's when farmers know that's the time to start applying their fungicides to their stone fruit trees. And the Lagerstroemia, the crepe myrtle, has the reputation of when you see it in bloom, that's the time to plant your final block of corn for the season.
Oh, that is cool. And incidentally, they can get big. I saw one in the Botanic Garden in Tokyo, and it had a trunk that was about 3 feet through, and it was about 40 feet tall.
Oh, my.
In time.
Yes. All right. Crape Myrtle, check them out. Warren Roberts, the Superintendent Emeritus of the UC Davis Arboretum and Public Garden. Find out more information about that beautiful location online, arboretum.ucdavis.edu. Warren, thank you so much for the Plant of the Week.
Thank you, Fred.
Garden Basics comes out every Tuesday and Friday. It's brought to you by Smart Pots. Garden Basics is available wherever podcasts are handed out, and that includes Apple, iHeart, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, Google, Podcast Addict, CastBox, and Pocket Casts. Thank you for listening, subscribing, and leaving comments. We appreciate it.